So, hey guys, welcome to day 7 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Improvement Week. And today we're going to be talking about misplays and such. So, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, in my opinion, there are 3 different types of moves that you can make, or actions. So, we have, of course, the optimal play, and then the optimal play with information. And then after that is everything else. Like, for example, I don't know, activate Baron effect to target itself, and then negate the destruction effect with a Baron's Omni negate. I mean, that's not necessarily a game losing play, depending on how far ahead you are and how good or bad your opponent is. All of that is kind of fixed, but there is something more fixed than that, and that would be the cards in the hand. So we can only tell what they are by hindsight, and then after that, it would be the order of the cards on the deck. And not only that, but also your opponent's full deck list. So to make the actual optimal play, you would need to know all 15 of the cards in your opponent's extra deck, all 5 in the hand, and then the 35 in the main deck. And then you would also need to know your 5 in hand, your 15, and then however many you have in your main deck. So in this case, I have 38. And by the cards in the main deck, I mean the exact order of every single card in the main deck. That is what you would need to play fully optimally with every single play, which is a bit ridiculous. So for example, if I were to reveal my opponent's and with triple tactics talents, that's completely and absolutely soul crushing. But if on top of that I actually knew what their top deck was before they even drew, then at that point the game is pretty much unplayable, and I can do an absurd play that prevents my opponent from having any type of action. Well, it kind of depends. It's not necessarily doable with every hand that I might have, but there are lines and plays you can do with that much information so that your opponent would never be able to win, no matter what actions they would choose to do. So, yeah. Continuing on with this duel, though, we're going to do Rhoda, and then we're going to activate Rousing Effect. And here my opponent's going to Imperm, so this just coincidentally happens to be the optimal play. But if I had let's see, I can't check deck here, but if I had either Vanquished Soul Heavy Borger or Vanquished Soul Caesar Valius in hand, it would be no longer the optimal play. And there's also Stake Your Soul with a Fire in hand, which would also make that not optimal anymore. I'd be able to like link off Rosin, add back Rosin's hand, and then special summon Xiaolong by revealing the other fire or Rosin to summon Xiaolong, and then we can search the trap. So this is not the optimal point to infinite impermanence just in general, but in this case it will be because I just don't happen to have anything that allows me to kind of play around the infinite impermanence in any sense of the word. So yeah, okay. Okay, Imperm here, and then Maxi. This Maxi here is actually extremely suboptimal, but I know why my opponent is activating this Maxi here. It's because their hand cards, I don't know all 3 of them right now, but I'm pretty certain that one of these 3 is a second Maxi, and then there might even be a Mulcharmy. Not very certain about that, if that is the case or not. And then one of these, I believe, might be Gimmick Puppet Little Soldiers. So yeah, not a whole lot going on here. So if you were to max C here, it is only an upstart anyway, so it's not really that worthwhile. So let's think of it this way. If you activate Maxi here, and I were to link off, if I were to play into the Maxi a little bit, I would just link off into Rock here, add back Rosin, and that would just be a pure upstart. But what if I just don't do that, and I just pass? It's just neg1. And in fact, I have infinite impermanence and I have DD Crow. And you don't have much, but you happen to be on Gimmick Puppet, and you also summon to the wrong zone here, so that's two misplays back to back pretty much. So we have Gimmick Puppet Rouge Doll being sent to the graveyard, which I will just simply activate a Crow on. So goodbye. And since this sends for a cost, it would have been a misplay to immediately banish the Rouge Doll. You would want to at least wait for it to attempt to try to add to hand, because technically my opponent could still have Foolish Burial, and they could just try to Foolish Burial a second Rouge Doll. So anyways, yeah, that's another thing. And also, yeah, we're popping the little soldiers. And then another Maxi. Perfectly fine. We'll normal summon the Rosin, adding the Caesar Valius, and we'll just punch twice. Yeah, there's no real problem with this. And now our opponent is back to this point, and they had no play aside from normal summon little soldiers. So we can tell just in general, our opponent had nothing, right? And because of that second maxi and how they used it, same thing as the first. There was going to be no draw from this. The only way you could guarantee a draw is if you were to chain it to my effect of rock effect to special summon. And that would still only be an upstart. But nope, my opponent chooses I will go neg1 instead. So that's what ends up happening here. Well, not that it really mattered. Anyways, in the whole scope of like everything, like technically that would have been the optimal way to use their maxi, right? But my opponent had so much nothing, it genuinely didn't really matter. So yeah, that's kind of how that goes. And even if you did do maxi in a way that would force me to give you draws, it's not exactly going to matter. And technically, I still don't know the exact cards on top of my opponent's deck here. So maybe the optimal play was actually to play into the maxi, depending on what my opponent's next draws were. So in this case, my opponent drew two cards, which I don't know what they are, and they pass. So technically, if I summoned Rock both times, this guy activated maxi. It might have been actually just perfectly fine to just summon the Rock, summon the Rosin, whatever. But because I did the minimal play, my opponent had two copies of Maxi, right? If I played into the first Maxi, it would upstart on both by turn 2, potentially. So it's not necessarily uh that great. And they would get a third draw by this turn, and then they would get the draws for turn as well, so they would have a little bit better card economy going, I guess. And as you could see from my hand, I didn't have many interactions. It was just DD Crow plus the Imperm, which I mean, sometimes it could be enough, but it's not guaranteed at all. But yeah, that was essentially my opponent just playing arguably terrible. But you could argue that the Imperm was out of desperation to begin with, because their hand, they just didn't have much hope for it. And maybe they were hoping actually with the Maxi that I would tag out after the Imperm. I mean, nope, we don't really have much here. So yeah, that's kind of how that goes. But you know, with hindsight bias, we can say that the majority of the actions my opponent took here were strictly misplays, and we won't know for sure now because well, I personally don't have the information about what cards were on top of my opponent's deck, but if they actually upstarted off of their maxis instead of yeeting them all into the void, then there was a chance that my opponent actually drew into, well, they would draw into something actually dangerous and actually be able to threaten being well, or being actually able to do a gimmick puppet FTK, which I mean, who knows? Maybe, for example, they could upstart into, let's see, upstart into Condolence Puppet. And then we could do like maybe effect to send I believe it's in this case it would be wait yeah okay uh send like this doll and then kind of just punch me really hard. Yeah, I don't really have a good play for getting punched really hard, but now that I see the Horus cards, I'm pretty sure the cards in their hand were probably Horus cards. Ah, this is starting to make a lot more sense. So one of the cards in their hand was probably Damutef, right? But aside from Damutef, what else would you have? And also these ratios are kind of whack, but let's see, Fualos. Every time your opponent would special summon for the deck and or extra deck, they could potentially have Fualos. Like, they could. And then they definitely did not have Cult Die. So rank up Magic Argent Chaos Horse. They might have had one of these as well. So something like this, and then this is dead actually as well. So Bistal, this could have been in the hand. Doll wouldn't be in the hand. Gimmick Puppet Cattle Scream is also dead in the hand. So my opponent could have had this as well. They have a good amount of bricks, judging by how my opponent played and how they didn't have any actions they could take. I'm pretty sure they had a combination of some of these cards just stuck in their hand. I think it's pretty safe to say, at least. And the hand trips are kind of weird, honestly. I don't really see the purpose of playing Fualos in an FTK deck. Like, it's not even good to cross out necessarily. How many times do you actually special summon? And how many times do those special summons actually work with Fualos here? Special summon from the deck. We have Doll special summon a monster from the deck, and I think that's the only time that happens. And then you special summon like maybe 4 or 5 times from the extra deck. So I mean, that's like maybe draw 6. Well, if you have the ability to tank just one interruption, you're perfectly fine through a Fua, right? Ah, okay then. But yeah. Wait, why are you running Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit? That's an awful cross-out target. Hmm. I don't think there's like anything that really gets screwed over by that. Okay. But yeah, with the power of hindsight bias, we can technically figure out what the plays would be. And even if my opponent did not have psychic powers and knew my exact hand and deck order card by card, then, you know, they still didn't play that correct, in my opinion. So with the maxis, should have been more patient with it. With the imperms, yeah, I don't really see why you would use imperm like that still. Yeah, that was okay, I guess. Imperm, you could argue there was a consistent play, and then there's a risky play, but it's not really that worth it to allow me to play as the Vanquish Soul player because of how my deck works versus how yours might work. So genuinely, I don't think there was that much you could do because my hand, regardless, is probably a lot better than yours, I guess. So it's fine. And if I did search with the rosin, it actually wouldn't have made much of a difference because uh, if I were to special summon Xiaolong, actually, well, yeah, you would always get the maxi draw, and then Xiaolong would search the trap, and then to actually trigger the trap, I need the correct attributes. So in this case, I just happen to have a dark in hand. So I mean, you can never play around the trap here. So technically, that you could argue that's a decent imperm, or you could just save the imperm for actually like Xiaolong. I think that would have been technically the optimal place to imperm in this game, just to force me to give you, I guess, max E draws as well. If you consider that, chain 1 Xiaolong, chain 2 max E would have been the optimal play here, I think. But yeah, that's really not that much going on here, I guess. With the optimal plays and then the optimal plays with information, I mean, you shouldn't really, unless you're trying to be like a world champion. I don't think you should really care too much about the optimal play as much. I mean, there's some things you can kind of figure out with what cards your opponents are playing and whatnot. But for the most part, um, it's not really that big of a concern as long as you're at least doing the best plays with given information. Then you're still doing pretty good. So, for example, with this here, my opponent is going to Prolia here. Doesn't really matter. We're going to special summon this. Upstart, cool. And that was the only draw they're going to get. Distrudo, target, Ugaris, special summons, back, the Dark Grepher, send, and then we're just kind of comboing off here. Our opponent doesn't have any response, I believe. So, yeah, we're activating effects. Yep. Activating this, activating that. Special summoning back this guy. Galatea. I think this was before I adjusted my extra deck, but if I were able to link out this token, that would have been a little bit better, I guess. Going through all of this now. Relink, Galatea. Okay, I think I could have had an additional IP, potentially, if I actually linked off the token. I think that's what it was, right? Something related to that, maybe? But, yeah, the only IP target I have to make would be, like, Nightmare, Unicorn. But, alright. In this duel here, you're going to see me, like, somewhat misplay. So, alright, special summon Doom King. Okay, this effect is only activatable in the main phase, so immediately right now, I should be using Shooting Riser's effect in order to synchro summon into Red Eye Zombie Dragon Lord. This is the optimal play right here. But what I'm holding for is for potentially Shiranui Sun Saga in order to do a pop for some reason. I don't remember my reasoning behind this, so yeah, I couldn't tell you. But alright. Blazing Cartesia. Monster freaking Reborn didn't play around the one of Monster Reborn, technically, I guess. Because their sequence was actually super bad here. They were much better off activating Monster Reborn immediately and not summoning the Blazing Cartesia. There's no reason why, but let's assume they summon Blazing Cartesia, right? In this case, even right now, it's not that great, but if I were able to have Red Eye Zombie Dragonlord chained to Monster Reborn as Chainlink 2 to reborn Dingirsu, then Dingirsu can just send Blazing Cartesia or whatever you make with Blazing Cartesia immediately, uh, even if you were to chain it, right? So, that was technically a misplay on my part, but alright. We're just going to activate Doom King effect to negate, and then we're going to just banish the Incredible Ecclesia with the Omni negate here. And this misplay essentially happens because I want my opponent to kind of get screwed over a little bit, and I was expecting my opponent to actually just start off with Incredible Ecclesia or like Fallen of Albaz to like fusion summon something and not like strictly go into Monster Reborn anyways. But you know, hindsight, pretty hard to tell. And yeah, that's kind of how that game went. But yeah, if we were to just have a little bit better of an example of how insane it is to play legitimately optimally. Kashira Ogre, if for example, I go ahead, special summon Kashtira Ogre, my opponent chains to Kashtira Theosis, a Maxi. So first off, my opponent misplayed by not using Maxi either in the draw or standby phase before I could summon Kashtira Ogre, so my opponent would technically have made a misplay there. And that would allow me to, well, that would no longer allow me to be able to use Ogre's effect to excavate 5 and then banish 1. So the thing about Kashtira Ogre's effect in particular is Kashtira, I feel like these cards kind of allow you to play more optimally than you would normally be able to. So with the example of Kashtira Ogre and Maxi in this case, my opponent's next few cards could be, let's see, Maxi, Maxi, and then Perulia, Perulia. So in this case, I am actually perfectly fine to just go like normal summon Rise Heart. Well, actually not Rise Heart. Theosis would have special summoned Fenrir. And then we could actually decide, okay, I'll actually instead this time, instead of going into Kashtira Rise Heart, it'll be more optimal to go into Scareclaw Cache because I might have like Ash Blossom, or in this case, Deck Lockdown, which would likely prevent my opponent from being able to shuffle their deck. So in this case, my opponent probably won't be able to play under Deck Lockdown. And then their next like 3, 4, 5, 6, who knows how many draws are all dead, right? Because I can actually Ogre on turn 2, turn 3, whatever. And I can keep banishing their cards and then they'll just only draw into like Maxi and Molcharmi cards, which are going to be useless because they can't play the game. And every single card they would draw off of Maxi or the Perulia would all be dead. And the draws for turn are also dead, just completely screwing my opponent over, right? So this type of play with Kashtira, pretty strong, but technically, you don't need to be on Kashtira to do this type of play. So if I just had like a deck lockdown, and instead of a Kashtira card, we could have instead just a somewhat strong-ish generic boss monster that I summoned somewhat minimalistically. So maybe with DD, it could be like a Deus Machinax, but specifically a Deus Machinax that I made by climbing from King Tell. So if I went like, instead of like Gilgamesh into Deus, maybe I went like into Wave King and then into Deus, but not into the Marksman King Tell. That might actually be the complete optimal play. And it might be a game-losing play to make it with King Tell instead of Wave King Caesar, because my opponent would get 1 extra draw off Maxi, and that draw might happen to let them play. So yeah, that's how absurd Yugioh can be, right? And that's obviously like shouldn't be humanly possible unless you have well basically cheats that allow you to see your opponent's actual deck order and their hand. So maybe there even is a play where I don't even summon Kashtira Ogre at all, and just activate like Lockdown Pass, and then summon Ogre the next turn and just do like Ogre beats. And that might be perfectly fine, right? So there's no telling if your opponent's, for example, bricked, and their next card will also be a brick. So you wouldn't have to play into Maxi at all, and that might be the optimal play. And you can just OTK next turn. Like, something like that is just not information that you have for free. But yeah, with whatever hand, right? Like, if I just do a test hand, this hand, I would probably start by activating the effect of, well, special summoning Unicorn, and then we could consider activating Unicorn here. And that would be fine. There's really no good way to play this hand, aside from special summon Unicorn, right? And then there is potentially the follow-up idea of normal summoning Ghost Bell. to make either a Changying or Baron with the Ghost Bell. Either one is fine because I can technically still prep to summon Ogre. And then, what's our next card? Fissure. Fissure is like a little bit nice, but it'll be 3 turns before we can actually proceed anywhere in terms of like advancing my board state. So that's a little bit rough. So this would be turn 1, turn 3, 5, and then turn 7. So that's pretty rough, I guess. Except if I do make Baron, I technically do also have the option of using Baron to Monster Reborn back the Kishtira Unicorn. But I don't know at what point I would draw like a Theosis, a Birth, or a copy of Rise Heart. Which all of these are technically able to work as combo starters with the preparations. And there's technically also Scarecrow Cache, Here Cache, which also work because I can banish the Unicorn special summon off of the prep, and that kind of works. But you also have to consider that this won't be the deck order actually anymore, because actually I will shuffle the deck if I activate the effect of Ogre. Well, it's not necessarily going to happen on this turn, but it might happen on turn like 5, where I activate Ogre effect to search the copy of Big Bang just to get it out of my extra deck. And then there's also the potential of using both copies of Ogre to make I guess like Shangri-Ira to special summon like another Unicorn Fenrir or whatever later, which will also shuffle the deck potentially. And then my opponent, maybe they're actually playing the Zombie Vampire and they actually mill these cards off the top. And then I don't know. My next card is actually Deck Lockdown, and I would only have 1 copy of Theosis left in deck potentially. So yeah, pretty wild stuff, and you're not really able to tell what the optimal play is necessarily, but trying your best to find the optimal play is fine here. And I think it's kind of important, but making mistakes is perfectly fine. The important thing is just not making the mistakes again. So I don't know, for example, if I had psychic powers, I guess I could have won this duel in particular, I believe. So this duel, I've looked at this somewhat recently, and it would have been completely insane if I was able to turn this around. But yeah, let's see what our opponent is doing here. So, alright, Zephyrnoi, Secret of the Yangsing, Hulk. So this is a pretty old replay. So our opponent here is going to be doing a Hulk Dawn combo that spams out Omni Negates. So we go Denglon here. What is Denglon searching? The Zephyr card there. So, but because they searched Zephyrnoi, we can tell they already have the Omni Negate they wanted to search, which you would normally search off Denglon, so we have information on that. And then our opponent's cards in hand, we know all of them except for 1 right now. So they have Zephyrnoi, Nemesis Corridor. They have an Omni Negate that's specifically a counter trap. So I am pretty sure at this point that they have 9 pillars, but it's actually not 9 pillars, it's actually the Zephyrnoi counter trap, which I mean it's about the same. Warlord Savage on Astral Freebo. Danger Tsuchinoko pitching Doom King. Danger Tsuchinoko pitching the Phantom Knights. Here. Necroworld Banshee getting pitched off of the Mothman. Danger Nessie pitching the Astral Freebo. Try for all of these. Destrudo. And this here is my misplay. I activated Destrudo's effect in hand, in order to try to bait out my opponent, right? But oops, oh no, my opponent, they actually had crossout designator set, and they also run Destrudo as a one of for some reason. So oops, I guess. Oh, that's the game losing play. Then we have IP here. Back to send. We make Baron here. And then we have no good play because I know that's a counter trap. So yeah, there's really nothing we can do. If we just tried to make Calc would immediately get destroyed by the counter trap there. And then I don't have anything I can link climb into that does anything. So that's just pain. And we also actually activated Unizombie's effect, which specifically prevents us from attacking with monsters aside from zombie monsters. So we can't even run over the Yugioh here. So that's great, I guess. So we'll just get rid of the Borland Savage, I guess. Activate Banshee effect. We're going to attempt to negate Baron. Baron here, trades. Here, my opponent has priority, technically, and I don't have anything super good to make with the IP, actually. I can IP into freaking Dagda. If I recall correctly, the point of IP was specifically for the Galaxy Tomahawk combo I might have access to. Didn't really have access to it here, so not much I could do. And also have no life points because I activated Destrudo. So technically right here, I could have won the game simply by not activating Destrudo because I would have had the life points to kind of play through this, but which I don't anymore now. And I would have maybe been able to actually test for IP and then Doom King effect to like banish a guy. Something like that would have been maybe possible, right? Because the Colossus actually doesn't do anything here. So all I had to do was use my psychic powers to assume my opponent has one of crossout designator, and that one of crossout designator can banish a one of Destrudo. Because I'm pretty sure that our cards, uh, the only card we share is probably like in terms of engine, going to just be Destrudo. And nothing else, right? Let's see. They run Destrudo. I think I might run Jet in that build, but like, I don't think I would ever summon Jet here, so that doesn't really matter. And yeah, that's probably about it. And then actually, I don't remember. Do we have access code in this build? Because yeah, I don't. If I had access code, I could have climbed into access code as well. Potentially, right? I think we could go like IP, link off a bunch of guys, and then go like access code, attack, dismantle like the majority of that guy's board, and then there's like no follow-up in that deck with how it's designed. Because how it's a one-of and stuff, Rodon's pretty much a one-of as well. So yeah, that game, surprisingly winnable. But yeah, there wasn't anything to really take away from that. Like, technically, the game was winnable, but you know, mistakes that you make are just learning experiences, I guess. So, in this case, what I learned from that duel was that, let's see, I'm unlucky as hell. That's about what I could figure. If the dangers hit a bit differently, that could have been a deciding factor as well. But I mean, it was decent because it gave me access to Unizombie. Aside from that, I mean, if I adjusted my extra deck a little bit, that game could have been won as well. Like I could have went make Dagda, make IP, and then link summon into access code. and then access code effect to pop things. I guess that would have been fairly okay, potentially. And my opponent might unironically not have a way to out just a 4.3k attack access code made with IP. Actually, let's check the extra deck and see if they actually have an out for this. No, because they used up all of their engine. So yeah, if I unironically did make a kind of big chunky access code, yeah, they can't deal with it. Huh? Well, that's good to know, I guess, to some extent, I suppose. I don't think they could get that many bodies on the field because their main goal is to just turbo out Hulk here. So yeah, they already went through like long one as well. So yeah, I guess. Yeah, just try to look and see what moves lead you to being able to possibly win the game, and just keep trying those plays that you think can maybe possibly still win you the game until it becomes very apparent that it is genuinely possible to win the game, and that's when you know the game is lost. So up until that point, you just have to keep trying, I suppose. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.